Welcome to Faith Over Fear, the Christian Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I'm Natalie Portman, a wife, mama, birth doula, and childbirth educator. And I believe God has a better way for us to experience birth, one without fear, striving, or self-glorification. If you're ready to stop feeling overwhelmed and instead trust the Lord more deeply in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood, you're in the right place. Here you'll find inspiring birth stories, biblical encouragement, and practical wisdom to help you walk in faith over fear during this beautiful and challenging season. Now let's get started. Hi, friend, and welcome back to Faith Over Fear, the Christian Pregnancy and Birth podcast. Today I have a special guest joining me, someone I've had the honor of walking alongside through such a beautiful season of motherhood. Katie Prizzia first connected with me during her third pregnancy. She reached out for a one-on-one body assessment with me to help her prepare for birth, and from there, she and her husband David went through my childbirth education class together. Eventually, I had the great privilege of serving as their doula, and let me just say, I absolutely love when families invite support and education into their journey, even in later pregnancies. It's never too late to learn, grow, and experience something new. Katie is a faith-filled mama to 3 little ones, ages 5, 4, and 18 months, and today she's here to share her birth stories, each one uniquely different, but all covered in the Lord's provision. Her testimony is a beautiful reminder that no matter what your birth story looks like, God is present in every detail. Katie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. Let's get right into it. So let's start with your pregnancy with Jackson and that birth experience.
Okay, so Jackson, he was our first, and we were so excited when we found out about him because the Lord blessed us in the sense that it only took 2 or 3 tries. And I found out, and I didn't even tell David when I found out. I found out on a Thursday, and I literally was like, you know what? I need to take so many more pregnancy tests. And so I waited and I took some more on Friday and I saw it again. And then I was like, okay, I want to make it super special. So I went to Walmart and I got a cute little like Jaguars jersey onesie and I got a football and wrote, I can't wait to play catch with you, Dad. And then I ended up telling him the next day. And he was so excited. And he was like, when did you find out? I was like, Thursday. And we've been together 24/7 since then. How have you held it in? I was like, I really don't know. So we were super excited. We were living with his parents at the time, trying to find a house. We quickly pushed along our house hunting and we were able to find a home. And the pregnancy it was a breeze. I mean, I didn't have any trouble. I went to, all the appointments and they checked me and everything was good. And 33 or 34 weeks, I told my OB at the time, I was like, you know what? I think I may have lost my mucus plug. And she was like, oh, it's early, it'll grow back. And I'm like, okay, Dr. Google didn't say that, but you're the professional, so I'll believe you. And I don't even think it was a week later. I woke up at about 2 a.m. and really just that cramping where it's even as a first-time mom, you're like, this feels different. So I went out to the living room and laid down and I went and took a shower and David came out because he works out early. He came out and he was like, can I go to the gym? I'm like, yes, go to the gym. It's fine. He went to the gym, came back, and it just progressively got worse. He's like, I'm going to get dressed for work. We'll probably go to the hospital, get you checked out, and it'll be fine. I was like, yes, let's do that. Well, by 7 a.m., I went to the restroom and I saw blood in the toilet and I was like, okay, we got to go. So we hauled butt down the road to the hospital and we got there and they were like, how far along are you? I'm like, 34 weeks. And they're like, okay. So they bypassed triage. They put me up in a room. And at that point, I was like 3 centimeters already. And I should have read up more on just ways to deal with birth, I guess. And so they immediately put me on magnesium and painkillers. And I was just like, sure, let's do all of this. So they put me on magnesium for 24 hours. Couldn't eat, couldn't drink. And I was like, man, this was in the morning, so I hadn't eaten anything since that night before, so I was exhausted. But they came back 24 hours later, checked me, and they were like, okay, you haven't dilated, so we may be able to send you home, but you have to be on bed rest. And I was like, yeah, but I can get up and walk around, right? Because I was like super active throughout the whole pregnancy. The idea of just laying in bed, I was just like, that doesn't register to me. And they were like, no, if you can't promise that, then we'll just keep you here until you give birth. And I'm like, okay, fine, I promise. And they came back an hour later to start the discharge process. And they were like, we're going to check you one more time. And I had progressed to almost 5 centimeters. So they're like, okay, you're not going anywhere. And so they did the steroid shot. So by 10 o'clock, I was asking for an epidural. And I was in an OB practice that had many practitioners in it. And I had never met the one that was on call. And she said no. She said, we need to make sure that you're in labor, even though I was progressing. And so they gave me the narcotics, which essentially just knocked me out until midnight when I woke up in excruciating pain. And I was like, can I please have the epidural? And finally, she allowed it. And so the anesthesiologist came in and I got the epidural at 2. And then come 4:15, the doctor comes in. My mom's with us and David is with us. And she just like slams on the lights and is, all right, you're contracting, let's go. And I'm just like, whoa, can I have a moment? But I started pushing, and an hour and 15 minutes later, Jackson arrived, all 5 pounds of him. And it was funny because I remember crying to my mom in the middle of all of this before I started pushing. And I was just like, I thought I had more time. Like, I was 34 and a half weeks. I was like, everything was ready because that's just the type of personality I had. But I was just like, I'm not ready. And she's, you got this. Like, you have a community. It's going to be fine. And she was with us the whole time while I pushed. And yeah, they let me see him. I was able to kiss him and stuff. And then they whisked him off to the NICU. And I got to see him about 2 or 3 hours later, I think. But bless his heart, I was so exhausted. The only thing that I was really thinking about was the Panera sandwich and Caesar salad that David had bought and brought in right before they gave me the epidural. And they said, you can't eat anything. So that's all I was really thinking about. But yeah, and so he was in the NICU for a week. And we tried to stay that whole time, but about 3 or 4 days into a hospital stay where David and I were both like, we need our beds. Like, we want our big bed, we want our comfy bed. And, the NICU said, come whenever, any hours of the day. And so we did. And coming home was hard. I immediately went into his nursery and I sat in his chair and I started crying. And David came in and, he teared up with me because it was not what was expected at all. And it was not the ideal birth. I mean, we went to a doula and we practiced all the management and the coping mechanisms and the different positions. But that was about it. That was the only studying I did of a natural birth. And I was very much, I'll try it, but I didn't really know what to expect. And so it was just not what we expected, but there was just an amazing sense of peace about it. I knew Jackson was going to be okay. The Lord put that on my heart. The Lord also put it on our hearts to go home and get, another night or two of good rest because we're bringing this infant home with us, this little preemie home with us. So he was going to be a little more work in the beginning. And yeah, the Lord just he really truly showed up. And that was, looking back, I wouldn't have it any other way because the personality that Jackson has, it's just so reminiscent of that birth. Nope, y'all want to keep me in, but I'm coming and I am here. So that was Jackson's birth. So that was the first experience into childbirth. It did embarrassingly make me realize that I did not pay enough attention in health education in high school.
There is so much to learn about our bodies when we're going through this process. And it really is the biggest biological change that happens all at once, giving birth to a child. And it's not that you need to know everything about everything, but it is incredibly helpful to have that foundational baseline knowledge before you go into that experience. I mean, even terms and anatomy that they're referring to, you're like, what is a perineum? What is a cervix? What are these things that you're throwing at me? So did Jackson's very wild, unexpected experience, did that just totally change how you prepared for Madeline's birth and the pregnancy?
Absolutely. And it was really funny going back when I had started pushing. I was like 3 or 4 pushes in, and I was like, "Okay, how long is this gonna take?" And we had the most amazing nurse, and she goes, "Oh, honey, it can go anywhere from a couple of pushes to up to 3 hours." And I'm like, "What? That's not what they say in the movies. In the movies, it's a couple of pushes and they're out." She's, "Yeah, that is not how it works." And so after that hour and 15 minutes of pushing, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna definitely prep for this next time around." And I feel like Madeline's pregnancy was very different than Jackson's in that I went in for the ultrasound and she was measuring small. And that was the first big thing was like with Jackson, it was just up until the birth, everything was textbook. And with Madeline's, it started with, okay, she's measuring small. So there's a little bit of anxiousness that's already present. And then went back 2 weeks later and they said, okay, she's measuring great. Of course, we didn't know it was a she at the time, but they were like, she's measuring great, but you do have a hemorrhage that we can see it on the ultrasound. We need you to come back in 2 weeks. And I'm like, what's supposed to happen in the next 2 weeks? What could happen? And of course, they listed everything off, and miscarriage was one of them. So I'm just like, okay, let's just add that to the anxiousness level. And so went back 2 weeks later, and by the grace of God, it had shrunk to the point where they couldn't even see it. So they're like, you may or may not pass it. And I never did. And so at that point, I was 14 weeks, and we found out we were having a girl, and we were so excited. And it was amazing because with Jackson's, like I said earlier, I didn't really know anything. I trusted my doctor 100%, and I didn't know anything different. This time around, I was like, okay, I need to advocate myself a little bit more. And I had a feeling that they were going to push the progesterone shot on me because they didn't even know why Jackson came. They had no idea. And they were like, since we don't know, we're gonna recommend the progesterone shot. And the nurse practitioner was like, oh yeah, it's so easy. I don't even know if she had kids, but she was like, I had plenty of friends that took the progesterone shot. It's going to be fine. It's just once a week for until you're 36 weeks. And it was the first time where I was like, I don't know. So I went home and I truly gave it to God. I talked to the family, and of course, they had their concerns and they had their opinions. But I talked to David and I was like, David, I really don't feel comfortable. I'm like, this is God's child. If he wants this child to be born earthside, it's going to happen whether I do the progesterone shot or not. I'd been on birth control since I was 9, so I knew the effects of and putting in synthetic hormones into your body. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. And so I said no. And they, gave the eye at me and stuff, but they accepted it. But they did send me to the Rock, our regional obstetrician clinic, which is the high risk pregnancy, because they were like, we need to definitely monitor you so what happened to Jackson doesn't happen again. And I was fine with it. Every 2 weeks I went in and I got ultrasounds and it was great. And after that, she measured great. I did have some, I think, UTIs throughout it, which I'd never had a UTI in my life. And so from then, they're like, you're automatically deemed strep B positive. But yeah, other than that, I did prep a little bit more, or I attempted to prep. David and I did a childbirth class, and I read some books. I read some really good books, and I went into this pregnancy with the mindset that I can overcome this pain and I can have a super pain-free birth. And I went into this with the mindset of that is what's going to happen. So when her turn came, it was really cool. I was watching The Chosen, and we decided to name her Madeline after Mary Magdalene. And it was the Mary Magdalene episode. So when I went into labor, I was watching that, which I thought was really cool. We live about 30 to 40 minutes away from the hospital. With Jackson, we were only about 15 minutes away. So I called the OB and I was like, hey, like, they're 5 minutes apart, but they're only lasting like 30 seconds. They're like, you need to get here now. You live far away. It was 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon in May. And when we first moved out to where we are, it was just a 2-lane road and there's a high school on it. And I was like, okay, it's time to go. My dad brought Jackson over and my mom was coming to watch him. And then we left and we pull up onto the main road and it's like traffic for a mile down from the high school. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think we're going to make it. And David decides to like still continue with the traffic. I'm like, what are you doing? You have to turn at this light. So we turned at the light. We were able to get on the interstate. And I was talking to a friend of mine and she goes, God literally parted the Black Sea. David made it like the 25 or 30 miles it takes to get to the hospital in 19 minutes on a like school normal afternoon at 4 p.m. Like it was amazing. He said he was going a little faster because he was like, I wanted to get pulled over so we could call the cop and be like, hey, lead us to the hospital. But that didn't happen. But so we got there and David dropped me off and I walked in and I was like, hey, I'm in labor. They're like, okay, great. We'll get you to triage. Which I was like, what's that? I thought they just brought us up to a room, but because with Jackson, I didn't have to do that. So they put me in triage. I told her, I was like, I want a natural birth. So she hooked me up to the monitor, sat me in the reclining chair, and was like, I'll be back shortly. And that was it. And within 30 seconds, I pressed whatever button I needed to. And I was like, yeah, no, give me an epidural. I'm going to need the epidural. And so that put her in action. She's like making all the calls. Within 5 to 10 minutes, they're whisking me up to the room, which I'm like, why didn't y'all do that anyway? Because when she checked me, I was 7 centimeters. And then by the time I got up to the room, I was, they hadn't even checked me when the anesthesiologist came in and he was like, have y'all checked her? And they're like, we think she's 7, maybe 8. She's pushing 9 with the way she's acting. Y'all have to get her on that bed. Before I could get the epidural, they had to put the IV in my arm. Backtracking to Jackson's birth, when they were trying to give me the Pitocin post-birth, they blew my vein. This time around, they're trying to put the IV in so I can get the epidural, and the nurse blew my vein and it's just keep like I don't know if I was moving around too much or what, but they had to call the charge nurse and she was like, you need to sit still for 5 seconds. And I could tell she meant she was serious. And it was like, if you don't, you will not get this epidural. And I was like, okay, fine. So she'd put it in like there was nothing to it. The anesthesiologist came in. He did a great job too. And within 30 minutes, my doctor, who I loved, that was also a God thing. I actually got the doctor I wanted because I stayed with the same practice for Madeline's birth. And she was like, okay, are we ready to push? I'm like, no, they literally like just put the epidural in. Like it hasn't even started working yet. She's okay, you just let me know when you're ready. I'm like, okay. God showed up in the midst of the birth. Jackson's, I saw him afterwards, but like I was able to really pinpoint it during because this girl, she comes running in with a mask on and it's a nurse and she's, can I help you bring your baby girl in the world? And I'm looking at her and I'm like, what? And she pulled down her mask and I was like, oh my gosh, like Leslie, we did swim together and we like did lifeguarding together. And it was just so beautiful that God gave me someone that I can recognize in the midst of all this COVID stuff. And so I'm like, heck yes, you can, please. And so after that, I was like, okay, I'm ready to push. I'm starting to feel that pressure down there. And so she brought the doctor back in and she broke my water. And by the grace of God, 2 pushes, not even a minute, and Madeline was here. And it was the Lord's blessing that she was born on the day she was, because that's the birthday of my grandfather, who Jackson is named after, my Papa Jack. May the 4th be with them. So it was really beautiful that she was able to come into this world on her due date, on my Papa Jack's birthday, and to see God's presence through that It was beautiful. And then they said my blood pressure was a little high for one or two readings, and one of them was like when I was actively pushing, but they were still concerned. So they put me on magnesium again. So for another 24 hours, I was not able to eat or drink, but luckily my mom and I were prepared and that she had bone broth that she had already made. And so I was like, please bring it with you because there's not going to be any eating for me again. And that was really hard because looking back again, I didn't advocate for myself like I should have. But yeah, and then Madeline, she was able to be with us, the whole time, which was new for David and I, with Jackson being whisked off to the NICU. And we were able to, go home normally. And Jackson was super excited to welcome his baby sister home. And yeah, she's been a hoot ever since.
Oh, that is so precious. So then, now that you've had those two experiences and you guys finding out you're pregnant for a third time, how did your perspective shift even more as you prepared for that birth?
I was so ready to finally have my natural birth. I was like, this is going to happen. I did really good. I am undiagnosed ADHD, so I am an amazing perpetual learner. If I find a topic, I go all in on it. And so I feel like I learned really well with Madeline. Oh yeah, going back, it was not a pain-free birth, hence why I had to have the epidural. That mindset definitely had to change. But I was like, I feel like God is calling me to do this. I want to do this. Explaining that to my mother, who had only one, me, and was like, give me the epidural as soon as she got to the hospital. She's like, you don't get an award for going natural. And I'm like, that's great. That's not why I'm doing it. I was like, God truly intended for this to be unmedicated and natural. And I know clearly there are situations where medicine is needed and that God has also blessed us with medicine in that sense. But I was just like, I feel like he's truly calling me to this. I feel like this can bring me closer to him. And so I just started listening to all the podcasts I could. I found another great Christian childbirth podcast out there, which I'm so happy you're doing this because there's literally only one or two out there. So this is beautiful that you're doing this. And I mean, I just listened and I listened more and I just repeated stuff and I read books. I read Ina May's book.
Ina May's Guide to Childbirth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Redeeming Childbirth by Angie Tolpin was just gorgeous. And so I learned as much as I could. And about 14 or 16 weeks, I went on Google and I was like, Christian childbirth educator. And who popped up but Miss Natalie Portman. And I was like, oh, this is so great. And so messaged you and then we got to having our discovery call and I was like, "Oh, you go to 1122? So do I." And then we found out we had mutual friends and it was just awesome because I'm pretty sure we were like sitting in church next to each other that following Sunday.
I know. And it was funny because after we connected, we would run into each other all the time because we had all these circles that we ran in together and we had no idea.
No.
So funny.
And so that was beautiful in of itself. And then you came out and did the body assessment. And then I was like, we get a discount on our childbirth class. So let's just go ahead and do this. And David told me later, he's like, yeah, my friends gave me a hard time for going to another childbirth class because they're like, isn't this your third? And I was like, yes, it is, but you can never learn too much with this. And so did your childbirth class and I just used you as a resource and you were great. You let me text you with any questions. All of our play dates, I always had something that I wanted to share or a question I wanted to ask. And then I had been praying the whole pregnant. Well, so that talking about Christian's pregnancy, we were so excited to find out that we were pregnant. And then about 24 hours later, I was hit with an anxiety I had never felt before. The first two, the Lord blessed me to not have any perinatal depression anxiety or postpartum depression anxiety. So I never really was able to relate to friends that would talk about it and everything. I would, just try to listen, be there for them. But this pregnancy, I was hit with it, and I was hit with it very early on. It was like 4 weeks, because I remember we went to church that Sunday after we found out. We told the people we were close to at church, and I couldn't get through it without crying, because I was like, yeah, we're pregnant, and I'm so scared. And, I was down at the altar almost every Sunday, just praying for myself and having people pray over us. And because I was just so anxious. And it lasted 14 days. And if it were to have gone to 15 days, they would have deemed me as the perinatal depression and would have probably tried to treat me for it. But the Lord stopped it. So I was able to be excited from then on. And one big thing I prayed about was that my mom would be accepting of me wanting to go natural, because it took her a while to be on board, because again, she was very much, you don't get a medal, like why go through this pain if you don't have to? And I told her, I was like, I would love for you to be in the birthing room with us again, because she wasn't there with Madeline because with COVID and the restrictions and everything like that. Plus, I actually did want to do it just David, and I'm happy we did. But with the third, I was like, this could possibly be our last. And mom, I would love you there with us, but I'm letting you know I'm going unmedicated. Like, this is happening. And she was like, we'll see. And I was like, no, like, this is happening. And so throughout the pregnancy, I would talk to her about it. And I would give her like little things that she could do to, one, keep reminding her this was happening, and two, be like, hey, if David needs a break, here are some tips and tricks that you can use to help get me through it. And so we attended your childbirth class, and I passed a lot of that information on to her. And I just kept praying. I was like, God, please help her to accept this and be supportive. And if she can't, then please bless her with the strength to say, I love you. I'm going to come up after, or I'm going to wait out in the waiting room, and then I'll see you guys. And so that was pretty tough, because it was almost having that constant, are you sure? Are you sure? But the Lord blessed me with so many verses to go to. And it was definitely the birth that I truly was in constant contact, praying without ceasing with the Lord the whole time. And I mean, I kept a journal, and it was almost daily where I would find something. I'd be listening to a song and I would write down the worship lyrics, or I would be just reading, and something that never stuck out to me before would stick out to me. And one big one that I wrote, that I still have written, it's Romans 12:1, and it's, may my body be a sacrifice to the Lord, because that's what I wanted. I was like, this body is yours, God, and you intended it to be used for unmedicated birth. And I know it's going to hurt, but I surrender it to you. And then I read your post. I think it was an Easter post, but it was about your birth with Ellie, and how you were just brought eye to eye with God in that unmedicated birth. And I was just like, I took a screenshot of it and I sent it to David, and I was like, this is what I want. And that kept me going. And so finally, I think it was like 34 or 35 weeks, maybe even later, when mom texted me and she was like, hey, I don't think I'm going to be able to be in the birthing room with you with an unmedicated birth. I don't know what a peanut ball is. I don't know what the essential oils you want. I don't know the difference between a birthing ball or a peanut ball, or the different positions you want. And she's just, can you text Natalie and ask her if she'll be your doula? Because I will help contribute to that fund. And I like texted you, and within 5 minutes, you were like, let me ask Brian. And then within another minute, you were like, yes. And it was just like the most beautiful answer to a prayer that I had seen, a tangible answer to a prayer that I had seen in a really long time. And so I still continued, to read the books and listen to, any time I got to listen to a podcast on natural birth, I was just like listening to it and just soaking in. And then it was 38 weeks. I went for my 38-week check, and he was like, okay, you're 3 centimeters, but that doesn't mean anything. He's like, you could go in a week, 2 weeks, or you could go tonight. Do you want me to strip your membrane? And I was like, no, thanks. And he's okay, that works. I had the most amazing doctor. The fact that he was a man, so I had switched doctors between Madeline and Christian because another funny story about Madeline's birth was we had to drive past our closest hospital to get to the other hospital. And I'm pretty sure I know I had tears in my eyes because I was in so much pain. I looked over, I'm pretty sure David had tears in his eyes because he was like, we could literally be going right there, but we have to drive another 15 miles. So we made sure to make the switch. And I chose a male, and I was like, you know what? It's fine. I'd seen him before, and he was like, are you planning on having any more kids? And I was like, I think we are, but I'm not sure when. This was literally like a month before I found out I was pregnant. And he was like, we would be so happy and honored if if you chose us to have that birth. And I was like, okay, for a guy to say that, that's pretty cool. And I know it's a business, but it was, genuine. And I asked him at one of the later appointments, I was like, how do you feel about an unmedicated birth or a natural birth? He was like, what, you mean like with no medicine? I'm like, yeah. He's like, that sounds fine to me. That's less work for me. And I was like, perfect, because that's what's going to happen. And so saw him that day. He told me it probably won't happen, but it could happen tonight. It could happen next week. But I was starting to feel the very familiar cramping. And so I told David, I was like, it's definitely going to happen within the next week. And as the afternoon progressed, I was like, it's definitely going to happen within the next few days. Oh, it's definitely going to happen in the next 48 hours. Okay, these are getting a little more intense. So that was when I texted you, and you were very calm. You were like, okay, we'll just see how this goes. And I texted a friend of mine because I got that fear came back again and anxiety. And I was texting her, and I was like, did you feel this right before, you know, you went into labor? And she's like, yes, it's, the hormones that are raging. I can't tell you when it's going to happen, but you've got to, be in the word, get on your knees, be with the Lord. And so I like sprinted into my little war closet, our master closet, and I closed the door, and I just opened my Bible, and I found the verse, and I just prayed the verse over myself. And it was the first time of understanding praying scripture over yourself. It was Isaiah, and I just constantly prayed it over myself. And after a little while, I was able to get up off the floor, and I was calm. And I was like, okay, I think this is going to happen within the next 24 hours. And so I texted my dad, prepping him because he lives about 10 minutes away. And he was prepped to know when he needed to get in the car and come rush over here to be with the two olders. And I texted mom, and I was like, get your bags ready, be prepared. It's going to be soon. And then we went to bed. I was like, David, you need to sleep out on the couch, or at least fall asleep on the couch, because I'm going to be tossing and turning. And I was tossing and turning. I was laboring. I was peeing every 5 minutes, maybe. I was like, this is new. But I was doing that for a couple of hours, and then all of a sudden I felt him drop. And I got the birthing ball, and I moved through 3, 4 contractions, and David like sleepily walked into the door, and I was like, we gotta go. It's time to go. So called you, called my mom, called my dad, and dad was here within 5 minutes. And you were like, call labor and delivery, let them know you're coming. So I did that. And this is the part of the story that I love. So I walked in, and of course it's 2 a.m, right? We walk in, and there's someone checking in to the emergency room ahead of me. And bless this young guy's heart who's checking him in. I mean, I'm like, there is no modesty. There is no care. I am moo screaming up a storm. They're trying to get me a wheelchair. My mom's like, yes, get her a wheelchair. I'm like, don't get me a wheelchair. Like, because it was back labor, which is what I had with the other ones too. And I just stood there, and I was still cognizant enough to where I was like, I must not be mooing or making a big enough scene because they're not rushing enough. So I like went louder. I did not care. And so finally they like had me fill out or sign the few forms, even though I signed everything. They still make you sign stuff when you're in the midst of labor. And so they rushed me to the elevators, put me up. I told them one fun thing was I always said, if I have a boy and then a girl, we are not finding out the gender of our third. And that's exactly what happened. So the whole pregnancy, I told my doctor, and he was like, I'm not even putting it in your chart. And so that it was kept secret. I went to triage and I was like, we're not finding out. And they got so excited. They were like, oh my gosh, it's an unknown. And I was like, and I'm not using any medication. And they're like, that's great because you're 9.5 centimeters. We need to get you to a room now. You have a bulging bag. And I was like, great. So I'm walking and one of the nurses leads me into the very first room. And they're like, no, put her in room 803, which is literally like all the way down the hallway. And I'm like, what's going on? But I'm like set and I'm having to stop to contract. And I had the most amazing set of nurses where the nurse would be like, all right, dad, get in position. And she would squeeze, and then David would be holding me. But it was so funny because I'm starting to go into that twilight zone, but I'm still hearing, she's walking. And I was like, yeah, like it would be too painful to sit down. And I like remember looking behind me and there's two nurses. One has a thing of towels and the other one has a bucket. And I'm like, what is going on? And later when I came to, I was realizing like, oh, bulging bag means like as soon as that bag breaks, like that baby is coming. So they were like, she's probably going to give birth in the hallway. And there's just like a slew of nurses. And I'm pretty sure there had to have been like 15 nurses in that room. I think it was because it was 2 a.m. and it was a very quiet night, they informed us. So I think they were all just, let's just go see this birth. And so we got into the room and I climbed up on the bed on all fours and I just stayed there. And they tried. And this was also where God was so good. They really, even if you're going unmedicated, they really want to put that IV in just in case. And she tried like once or twice. And I don't know if she saw red in my eyes because I was just like, touch me. And she like threw it across the room. She was like, this isn't happening. We'll figure it out once the baby comes. And so that was when you walked in, and my mom was like just right there behind you. So we got to the hospital at 2. This is probably 2:30, 2:35 at this point, and David is having to do the double hip squeeze, and he's not getting a break because the contractions are not stopping. Like, Christian was just like, I'm just coming. I'm not going to give her any bit of a break. So it was just a constant contraction. And so finally you were like, David, get in front of her. You nurse, come over here. You push on this side. I'll push on this side. I heard my mom crying. And so that was after the fact. I realized that she was so against me going unmedicated because she knew the pain and she didn't want to see me in it. It wasn't like she thought negatively about it. It was she was thinking I'm going to see my baby in pain and I don't want to. And so she's crying in the corner. So I'm really glad that we were able to hire you because she wouldn't have been able to help. And David and I are nose to nose. And bless his heart, at one point, I'm like just gripping at his chest. And he like tries to pull away for something. And it may even been to have just repositioned. And I was like, what are you doing? And like the nurses were like, don't move. All of y'all were like, don't move. He was just moving. But I mean, the water was able to break on its own, which was really cool. Never had that experience. And he came sliding out, not even, it was one push. And I was able to give birth on all fours, which is the position I thought I would feel most comfortable in, but was able to give birth on all fours. And I was able to semi catch him. And then afterwards, we were so excited. My mom was like, it's a boy. And I like I couldn't turn around to start the golden hour. I was like, I think my body was just in shock that I was just like stuck in the all fours position with my head on the mattress and my chest on the mattress. And they're like, don't squish the baby. And I'm like, I'm not squishing the baby. All of my weight is on one side. I was like, but I can't get out of this. My body was just like shocked because it was so fast. And so after a while, we were able to turn me over and I wanted to do the delayed cord clamping. They that was another great thing that you did. You came in and you were like waving my birth plan. You were like, this is her birth plan. And they were so great at really trying to make it happen. But they did notice that he was just not becoming colorful. And so they were like, we have to, cut the cord. And at that point, I was like, I need a minute. Like I was just, I felt bad afterwards because I thought I would feel like this oxytocin moment where, just this beautiful heavenly moment after. And I just didn't get that. And my body was just in shock after. So it just needed some time to calm down. So I was like, that's totally fine. Y'all take him. He's, his health is more important than anything. So they took him. They were able to get him angry and crying. They discovered that he had hypospadias, which if they hadn't taken him, we never would have known that he has it, which is where his little pee hole is lower than it should be. And so they were able to address that. They were like, he has to pee right now, otherwise we have to take him to the NICU. And so they were able to get him to pee instantly. So that was a blessing. They found the hypospadias, but he was able to do what he needed to. So it wasn't like a immediate need that needed to be addressed. So they brought him back to me. And then finally I was able to just like breathe. And then my doctor comes walking. So my doctor lives on the other side of the city and he got the call. I mean, I'm pretty sure they called him as soon as I called them, prepping them that I was on my way, but he still lived pretty far away. And so he walks in, he's like, guess you had your baby. He's like, didn't I see you yesterday morning? And I was like, yes, you did. And he blessed me with the information that I did not tear at all, which was amazing. And so he didn't have to do anything. They did give me a shot of Pitocin in the leg, which I was fine with. I thought that was really cool. I'm like, if God wants us to have another one, I'm glad to know that's something I can advocate for. Be like, I don't want an IV. I will take the Pitocin shot post-birth, but until then, I don't want it. Yeah, and you went and got us coffee at 5 a.m. because we had to wait till Starbucks opened, and we were able to go home, I think 36 hours later. So it was just a beautiful, staunch difference between Jackson's and then a little bit of a difference between Madeline's. But still, all of them were just all so beautiful, and I would not trade any of their stories for anything.
Yeah, I loved that thrill of a birth that you had. And there's been a couple of those that I've had that it's usually second and third time moms where it's that like fast and furious, but it is a thrill whenever your baby is just like coming without anything that you're doing, that your body truly just knows what to do. And because the Lord has designed it that way, and it's just all unfolding, and it can be a little intense. So a labor that is 3 hours or less, we consider it a precipitous labor. And you certainly had a precipitous labor. And I've never gone through it myself, but just seeing it as a doula, it's almost like watching somebody hang on to a moving freight train where it's like the train is just booking it and you're just trying to hold on for dear life as it's happening to you. And yeah, it is so intense. But I found that post that you brought up that I posted at Easter time. And it says, a woman endures labor to gain her children, and Jesus endured the cross to gain us, his children. And it was one of those things where after I gave birth for the first time, and as I, spent the time meditating on the worship, what you were doing where you were like journaling if you like heard a lyric or a verse or something, and it kept occurring to me how much birth shows the heart of the Lord for us, his children, that, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he's crucified is going to the Lord and he's saying, Lord, if there's any way for this cup to pass from me, but not my will, your will be done. And I feel like a lot of us, when we contemplate the task and the challenge of giving birth to a human being, it can feel like that. Lord, let this cup pass from me. Like, I don't want to do this. This seems overwhelming, but not my will, your will be done. And I feel like when we have that posture, we get to enjoy the unfolding, however that looks. And for some of it, it's really smooth and it's easy. For others, it's like hanging on to a moving freight train. For others, it's a complete train wreck and everything goes completely wrong. But no matter how it's unfolding, that struggle parallels the gospel because Jesus looked at you. If you are a believer, Jesus looked at you and said, but you're worth it. You're worth this excruciating agony. And so it was like I could see the shadow of how the gospel was so interwoven into birth and the birth experience. So I love that you brought that up. And what was that verse again that was pivotal for you?
It was Romans 12:1. I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice to the Lord, holy and pleasing, because this is true worship.
Yeah. And it is true worship to lay before the Lord everything about your being, but your body is certainly no exception. It is the Lord's temple, and we get to honor him when we nourish our body with good foods, when we are moving and exercising. We get to honor the Lord when we get to feel our babies kick inside of our bellies. We get to honor the Lord by seeking him with what we decide to do with our bodies. And that's another piece that I love about your story. The Lord was kind of showing you through each pregnancy, not that you need to distrust your providers or anything like that, because I totally believe that the Lord, it's his common grace to give us the knowledge of our providers and all that. We don't take the back seat to what we should be seeking the Lord for, to choose certain interventions, to choose a certain birth setting, or to choose a certain kind of birth preference. I think it's really important for us to seek the Lord for those things instead of fully depending on our provider, fully depending on what other women have done, fully depending on ourselves to figure it out, but really seeking the Lord in the way that he wants us to honor him and honor our bodies as a temple for his presence. And I think that obviously extends well past even birth and pregnancy and postpartum, but I think especially in this time when it is such a physical change and event that is happening in your body. That's a beautiful verse. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Well, Katie, this was an absolute pleasure to hear your birth stories. I love that mamas get to hear just the differences. And we talked about this a little bit ahead of time, but to just hear how even one person can have three very different birth experiences and to see the Lord moving in all of those, some of them where things were not going right at all, some where there was some sense of, I'm feeling more confident in my ability to do this thing that the Lord's equipped me and called me to do. And then a third where it was just a manifestation of just the Lord's provision. And it had nothing to do with you, where it was all on you to figure all of this out. But you came to a place where you're like, I can't do this all on my own. And Lord, I just have to run to you constantly when I feel this anxiety bubbling up, when I feel inadequate, when I feel like I'm not equipped, and to see that because I know your heart. And it's not just in this that I see you doing this. I see you doing this in every aspect of your life. And so it's so beautiful to see how the Lord can take this season of your life to just draw closer to you. And that's what I pray for every mama that's listening to this, is that they would acknowledge that this season is beautiful. It's also really challenging at times, but that it is an opportunity for us to draw closer to him.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about their birth stories, so I could talk about it all the time.
Me too. Hence why I'm doing this podcast. Thanks so much, girl, and appreciate you. That's it for today on Faith Over Fear, the Christian Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I hope today's conversation encouraged your heart and equipped you to trust God more deeply in your pregnancy, birth, and motherhood journey. Hey, before you go, I want to gift you with a freebie. I've compiled some of my most popular resources inside the Christian Mama Birth Prep Library. It includes practical birth prep handouts, such as the labor positions cheat sheet, birth preferences checklist, and provider questions guide. You'll also get exclusive discounts and even a worship labor playlist to bring God's peace into your birth space. To get instant access, simply visit faithoverfearbirth.com or click the link in the episode show notes to sign up. You'll receive immediate access to these valuable resources created just for you. If today's episode blessed you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with some other mamas who could use this encouragement. Your support helps more women find this podcast and embrace faith-filled birth and motherhood. Let's keep choosing faith over fear. Bye-bye for now.